Hey Ben, I didn't think you'd make it tonight.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to make sure that we had a quorum.
I
Um,
appreciate you. Thank you.
but yeah, I might not be able to stay on the whole time.
That's okay. We'll try to get the minutes and stuff done early, so we can get that out the way. Perfect.
Hey everyone.
Good evening.
Ben, it's great to see you. Marisol might have been just saying this, but we know you're drawn in many different directions tonight, which we totally appreciate. If you have to drop off,
Understood.
go
You know,
ahead.
what I was saying to Marisol, I just wanted to make sure we had a quorum, so I'm on until we reach that point.
Grateful for that. We may have it even without you. I
Okay.
think the only vote we'd be taking tonight is adopting the minutes, so that'll be
Okay.
first thing. Let's see who we. Have you already done a count, Marisol? Are we one, two?
We only currently have five.
Five at the moment. Okay, so folks who have RSVP'd yes would be Daryl, Kaisha. I can't remember Rena. All right, so we'll give it a couple more minutes, but we can, um, if need be, get started and just, conduct that one vote once we have everybody present. There's Rena. That's good.
That would make six.
That's six. Okay, great. So that is quorum. Do you want to get us started, Russell?
Yes. So I'd like to welcome everyone, the co-chair, myself, and Tadiq. Also, everybody, all committee members. Thank you, Ben, for being here. Obviously, Scott wasn't able to join us. Thank you for everybody and the public for making it this evening. And actually, I will hand it off to my co-chair. Thank you, Daryl. I see that you joined us. So I will hand it off.
Thanks, Marisol. So, agenda tonight, not necessarily crowded in terms of the number of distinct items, but we do anticipate spending a fair amount of time discussing, in particular, the quarterly report and, among other things, specifically the ongoing challenges and obstacles we're facing, to fulfilling statutory obligations of the office due in large part to staffing constraints. So we'll be spending a fair amount of time on that, and there's a separate agenda item for staffing, just to make sure we address that as an area of particular concern, and also one where the committee may be able to play a more active role, may be able to to assist more easily than some of the other challenges. And then we'll spend a little time discussing our own roles and the working groups that we've discussed, and then hopefully have time to hear from members of the public who have joined or will join during the meeting. On that point, just a reminder that, in order to try to be able to hear from as many people as possible, we are now limiting the time for each speaker to 3 minutes, which is, as I understand it, consistent with other committees and public hearings. Anyone who would like to make a comment should email Kirsten Briner, which is KIRSTIN .BREINER at cga.ct.gov. The email is in our agenda as well. And then she will kind of keep tabs of who's made that request and sort of call on folks in order at the end of the meeting. As another reminder, we do welcome written comments at any time, which can also be submitted to Kirsten at that email address, and she'll forward it to the full committee. We've had at least one written comment in advance of this meeting. We appreciate that, and certainly welcome folks to weigh in, even between meetings, right? There's at any time you can get written comments before us that way. And then finally, just note that our semi-annual public hearings, which are our last was in June, our next is in December, are specifically designed to be to hear from the public, for the public to be able to weigh in both on the activities and performance of the committee and the Ombuds office. And those are the meetings that or hearings that can tend to go pretty long. So while we do welcome comments during our quarterly meetings like this one, there's definitely an emphasis on hearing from the public at those semi-annual hearings. As well, we'll discuss later this evening. We're going to be trying to have more public-facing events between these meetings, which would be a little more informal, but it will be a great opportunity to hear from folks. So that's sort of the lay of the land. But first things first, and we'll do this while we have the quorum. Maricel, if you want to take up the minutes.
So as a matter of housekeeping, let's approve the May meeting minutes, because the June meeting was actually a hearing. We do not need to approve those. So can we show, quorum so we can get the May meetings approved? Can someone?
Yeah, folks should have received them. If there's any desire to discuss or add to them, let's take that up now, and then we'll have them take a motion. Any discussion of the May meeting minutes? Okay, so I'll move to adopt them.
Seconded.
Great.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
Thanks, Andrew. So no opposition. Any abstentions? All right. So then those are adopted, and we can. And Ben, just for the record, we no longer need a quorum. Obviously, we value your presence here, but recognize there's a lot of demands on your time. So if you need to drop off, go ahead. We'll move on to the meat of the meeting. I didn't mean for that to be a terrible pun, but which should be the quarterly report from the Ombuds, Attorney Ward. We committee members have received a sort of written summary of the activities of the office being just Attorney Ward, which we'll be discussing since June, which was the public hearing a few weeks after our last meeting. That's also posted on our website, so if folks who are watching want to look at that, they're welcome to, but obviously it really only covers the highlights, so we just want to take some time now. Devon, if you want to give us a kind of summary of what you've been doing since our last meeting, what your kind of current priorities are, and in particular what challenges we're facing and the ways in which this committee can be of assistance. We'll try to move into that.
Sure. So thank you. Since the last semi-annual meeting on June 13th, we've tried to advance several foundational initiatives. We've adopted a triage policy. We posted some stakeholder engagement, and we have procured or started the procurement process for a case management system. The biggest obstacle right now is the significant staffing delays, which are continuing to limit our office's capacity to fully implement our statutory duties, particularly the health service report, which is due December 1st. And so kind of to go into more detail, the triage policy, I shared that with our stakeholders during stakeholder engagement, received some feedback on it, and we finalized that with plans to implement it once we get staff. But the process it just describes how when complaints come in, they're going to be read, sorted. An individual should get a response back within 45 days, and then it should be triaged and sorted to a OMSBUDS, assistant OMSBUDS, or an OMSBUDS for further follow-up. And so the case management system, which is actually called Case Management Tracking System, CMTS for short, is a platform that's being used around the country by multiple correctional oversight entities. It'll help us with implementing that triage system and staying on track. It has a number of capabilities, and it is quite pricey. The price tag for it ran about $20,000 for purchase, and then for each additional license, it's an additional fee annually. So it's a significant software investment, but I do think it's well worth it in that it will be able to have some of the granular detail that the committee is looking for in terms of being able to, once the complaints are inputted into the system, we'll be able to dig down in granular detail to be able to sort them by facility, by complaint type, even by the staff that are involved in the complaint. We should be able to sort it down to that granular level, even where the complaints are coming from, if the complaints are coming from folks who are incarcerated versus folks in the public. So it'll allow us to be able to have that kind of detail in sorting through the complaints and being able to identify trends in some of the complaints. And so it'll be really helpful. We've got approval from OPM to purchase it. It took a bit to figure out which one we wanted to go with. We looked at 3 different systems, and that was the one we ultimately selected. We received approval from OPM to purchase it maybe about 2 weeks ago, and we're in the process of procuring it. I'm going to have to go down to North Carolina, where the company's based out of, to do the onboarding and basically build. I'm going to be building out the system brand new for Connecticut. And so it's going to take about 2 days to do that. I'll be trained on it, and then I'll be able to train staff as they come in. And so we expect to have that operationalized by October. And so that's important. Staffing and capacity, staffing still remains, a significant challenge for this office. I am still the sole employee in this office. We have authorization to hire an additional 5 positions. They are administrative assistant, clerk typist, a associate ombuds, an assistant ombuds, specifically focused on health services, and another ombuds who we plan to use in an investigatory role. The administrative assistant and the clerk typist positions were posted, and those job postings closed yesterday. The remaining positions have yet to be posted, particularly with respect to the associate ombuds role. It requires the creation of a brand new job classification in state service by the Department of Administrative Services, and that requires a certain number of sign-offs between OPM and DAS to establish that position. It also requires some collaboration with the bargaining units. And so it may take some time to bring on that associate ombuds role. And just as a reminder, that associate ombuds role is a position that's identified in statute, but essentially is the person who the committee would designate to take over should something happen to the appointed ombuds. And so, you kind of looking at the Office of Child Advocate as a model. Christina Guillo right now is serving as the ombuds. She was the associate, she's serving as the child advocate. She was the associate child advocate before Sarah Egan departed. And so, this office would operate in a similar manner. And so we're working on creating that job classification. The other 2 roles, the assistant ombuds that's particularly focused on health services, that is a job classification for a nurse consultant, is the job classification that kind of corresponds with that role. And then the other one is a special investigator, is the job classification that corresponds with that other role. And so we're awaiting updates from OPM on those remaining positions. I've submitted everything, on my end, and I'm now waiting to hear back from them. But because of the significant staffing delays, the backlog in addressing complaints only continues to grow. We have now, at the time when I wrote this report, which was a couple of days ago, we were up to 388 complaints that we had not yet responded to. I've personally responded to 217 complaints, but it's again very difficult to track those without a case management system in place. And because of the delay in bringing on those the assistant ombuds positions, we are currently in jeopardy of being able to meet our December 1st deadline with respect to the health services report. And so I do anticipate with the clerk typist and assistant, administrative assistant coming on board, hopefully sometime in October, we'll be able to reduce that backlog by significantly. I'm hoping by upwards of 40%, and then even further into the future. But without those hires, we're going to continue to have this backlog of complaints, and frankly, the result is the confidence in the office amongst the incarcerated community is just being eroded. And that's very unfortunate. And I certainly hear that from not only advocates, but individuals in the facilities when I go to visit. Speaking of facility visits, I was able to visit, I've visited 14, I've done 14 facility visits since June 13th. I've made visits to Osborne, Bridgeport, York, Garner, McDougall, and Hartford. Some of those facilities I've visited several times. Some of those facilities I was only able to visit one time. Many of those visits were unannounced, consistent with our new statutory authority that allows for this office to conduct unannounced visits. I did meet twice with the individuals in Cheshire who are on hunger strike. Plan to meet with them again later this month. During my visit to York, was really going there for a number of reasons, but did have an opportunity to talk to central office and talk to Warden Sexton there. The procurement for the body scanners that I think I may have mentioned in a previous meeting have been procured. That procurement process has been completed, and implementation for those body scanners is anticipated for October of 2025. When I talked to Warden Sexton, her staff was actually planning to go to another facility in Rhode Island to look at the scanners and start doing some of the training for staff. And so we anticipate that the body scanners, which will greatly reduce the need for strip searches and cavity searches, to be brought online in the Manson, the women's facility, or excuse me, Manson, which is the youth facility, in York, the women's facility, by October of this year. Also convened two stakeholder engagement meetings on July 1st and July 2nd. Met with the governor's office shortly after session concluded, and also met with the OPM Undersecretary for Criminal Justice, Daniel Karpowitz. Spoke to them directly about the staffing challenges, implementation challenges. This office was very grateful, very lucky to have two interns, unpaid interns in our office this summer from New England Law. They were of great assistance with research into some systemic investigations that we have going on. One is pertaining to legal services. The other investigation was related to the legal services, or excuse me, legal expenses rather, that the Attorney General's office is spending in defense of the Department of Correction. And so they were really instrumental in doing some research and helping me prepare for the Freedom of Information hearing that was held last week in that regard. And so the office is collaboratively working with the University of Connecticut Law School. We anticipate having at least two students, in the office in the spring. So that'll be another great value add. And then the office is also planning a community listening session for September 25th at the office of the Ombuds. And I'm working on trying to do some town halls in facilities specifically for incarcerated folks. Again, I've certainly been to each facility. I've been to some facilities, several times. And I guess my hesitancy to do town halls has really been, I didn't want to go to facilities and just, listen to problems. I wanted to go and really be able to tell folks how this office was going to work and be able to solve some of their issues and kind of explain the triage process to them, explain kind of the resources that the office has. And so I'm hoping once we get this case management system on board and we get these two new hires, I'll be in a better position to be able to do these town halls and kind of go out to these facilities and explain a little bit more about what the office does. I also did send out, it's not in the quarterly report, but I just remembered I did send out a statewide email update to the incarcerated population, updating them on everything that happened over the course of the legislative session, noted, our collective win in shutting down the proposal to end the free messaging service, gave them an update on the body scanners, the body camera study that is ongoing, and also the increased financing for this office. I think I do mention that in the quarterly report that, as many of you all know, for this fiscal year, we have a budget appropriation of $790,799. That budget kicked in July 1st. And so did send out a statewide email to the incarcerated population, which I've heard several folks received. By way of public advocacy, I did in my official role offer testimony in support of releasing the footage of J. Allen Jones. For those who may not be aware, Mr. Jones is a gentleman who died in Garner in 2018. The medical examiner ruled his death a homicide. And his mom and his child's mother have been litigating his death for the better part of 7 years. As part of that incident, no officers were charged, even though the death was ruled a homicide. DOC stated that all their actions were in accordance with DOC protocols. And what advocates have been calling for is the release of that video. And I joined them in that call earlier this month in front of a Superior Court judge who is weighing whether or not that video should be released. And I think it's important to note that prior to that hearing, the DOC and the Attorney General's position where they were not going to release the video. And then after testimony that day in the hearing, DOC stated that they would be amenable to releasing portions of the video, but only in a controlled setting. So meaning, you could go down to either the AG's office or the DOC's office and be able to view a portion of the video, if you scheduled it at a certain time. And so I don't think that is a good solution. I don't think that satisfies some of the public disclosure reasons that we're calling for this video. I think, whenever someone dies in DOC custody, particularly when, it's at the hands of correctional staff, as identified by the medical examiner, I think there needs to be a significant amount of transparency about how and why that happened. And so was proud to join advocates and other folks in calling publicly for that testimony. And to that end, I also wrote and published an op-ed that ran in a number of Hearst Media publications. Feel free to check it out. But really the most significant thing, and I can't state it enough, is the need for staff. I am one person. I'm trying to do the best I can. But it is simply not, it's not enough. And at this point, September 23rd will be my 1-year anniversary serving in this role. And I certainly think it is not fair to the 11,000 people that I'm charged with, doing oversight of their facilities, and, to the state that, we don't have significant support for this office. And it's really discouraging to me because in that same time period, I've personally spoken to at least 150 cadets from the DOC. So new hires for the Department of Correction in that same period have been hired. And so, it's particularly discouraging to me that, I can't get one employee, but the agency that I'm charged with doing oversight for in that same time period has hired 150 people. And we both have the same HR agency working for us. And so, really calling on the committee, and I've discussed this with the chairs, for you all to in a very transparent and public way, reach out to your appointing authorities and kind of let them know, not kind of, but absolutely let them know that, it is imperative that this office be stood up and be staffed immediately, because we are certainly in jeopardy of not meeting our statutory mandate. And when that happens, as many folks may know, If we don't meet our statutory mandate, many folks are going to question why are we funding this office? And so I think it's imperative, and I cannot stress enough, it's imperative, it's crucial, it's critical that we get this office staffed. And so it's with that, I will turn it back over to the chair for questions if anyone has any.
Thanks, Yvonne. Yeah, so as noted at the outset and in the agenda, we want to spend a good chunk of time discussing what you just left off with, the staffing issues and our, what we can and will do to assist with that. I think because that's so significant, it's a big chunk, I'll just first invite questions for Attorney Ward and or comments about the other parts of the report, which I have a few, but I'll invite others first. I see, Ben, your hand is raised, so we can start there, and then we'll move on and spend a good bit of time on the staffing issue. So go ahead, Ben. I think you're unmuted.
Yeah, thanks, Tig, and thanks, Attorney Ward. First I want to say, I think you said it, but I just want to make it clear that the backlog of complaints is clearly a problem. Not just that it erodes, people's trust in the office and that their sort of concerns will be addressed, but it's just a problem. And you said that, and I think you believe that. I just want to put that out there that I personally, I think everyone on the committee agrees that should be something that's managed, and it sounds like you have a plan for that. I did have two sort of quick follow-up questions. When you said stakeholder engagement about the triage process, who were the stakeholders? It wasn't clear to me. Were those community members? Were those people who are currently incarcerated? Who were the stakeholders in that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, if you might recall at the last meeting, a number of advocates, who identified themselves as frontline advocates requested that I meet with them.
Got it.
And so it was two meetings. I think it was a total of maybe 8 or 9 individuals who represent various organizations. Obviously, Stop Solitary was one. Cindy Prizio attended. I don't want to misstate her organization. Ashley Turner and a number of other folks. So it was maybe 9 individuals who represent various organizations that deal directly with the incarcerated community or deal with their families. I know Ashley Turner's organization is a resource for families of folks who are incarcerated. And so that's who I shared the triage process with. So it was about 9 individuals over the course of 2 days.
Okay, thanks. That's helpful. I do think obviously getting the input from people who are incarcerated, once the system is working, to be is it understandable? Do they know how to access it?
Yeah.
Those things will be important down the road as other clearly important stakeholders. The other quick question I had was regarding the hunger strike. It's great that you sort of engaged with those folks in Cheshire a couple times now. From the reporting, it's not totally clear to me what the main concerns I have a sense of what's reported, but just what's your sense of the main concerns? How is the DOC addressing them? Sort of what's the likelihood that you can help facilitate that being resolved?
Yeah, thanks for that question. Their chief concern is the number of lockdowns at Cheshire. And so, I think when I went to visit them, it was maybe the second week of July. And at that point, over the 4th of July, from the beginning, July 1 through the 4th of July weekend, that first 7 days in July, Cheshire was in some type of lockdown status, at least 5 out of those first 7 days. Some of those lockdowns occurred on the 3rd shift, so they didn't impact visitation and movement. But that's number one in the concerns of the folks who are on hunger strike in Cheshire is the number of lockdowns that they're experiencing. And when I talked to the folks there, I explained the lockdowns are a statewide problem. The same issues that the guys over in Cheshire have are the same complaints that the women over at York have, and that the guys in McDougall have, is that the number of lockdowns is just impacting quality of life in such a inhumane way. And so, one of the things that I'm working on as a result of that meeting and result of those complaints is I'm trying to do an audit of compliance with the PROTECT Act, because even when facilities are in some of these modified statuses, folks are still supposed to be afforded certain amounts of out of cell time. And, you know, the complaints that I've heard from individuals at Cheshire are that the facility is not complying with the Protect Act in large stretches. However, I do, you know, I've talked to advocates, and again, I've talked to the guys at Cheshire about this. I don't think a lot of folks know that the Protect Act actually does allow facilities to not allow for out of cell time when they're in lockdown status. The statute specifically says that if they're in a lockdown, they don't have to let them out of their cells for out of cell time. Or, you know, right or wrong, I don't necessarily agree with that policy, but that's what the current state of the law is. And so so that's number one amongst their concerns. There was a concern about the cleanliness in the kitchen. I did do an inspection in Cheshire. I did an unannounced inspection at 3 o'clock in the morning in Cheshire because that is the time that the kitchen staff is arriving, and there's actually no one in the kitchen almost like right around 3 o'clock before the staff gets there. And there was some complaints and some concerns that was when the rodent activity was pretty prevalent. So I did an inspection, did not find any evidence of rodents in that facility. And so, you know, that was one of the concerns they had, lack of programming, you know, particularly the gentleman that I met with at Cheshire. A number of them are serving longer term sentences. They're there for, you know, a significant amount of time. And, you know, it's a complaint that I've heard from other folks that there isn't a great amount of programming for them because DOC, you know, does prioritize providing programming to folks who are going to be released back into the community fairly soon. And so, so that was an issue that they've had. You know, I met with them, then I met with the warden. I've talked to central office staff. I know that the staff at Cheshire has met with them repeatedly. And then, you know, each one of them has individual issues too, that are not, you know, more systemic stuff. But though the lockdowns are probably the number one issue for the folks at Cheshire.
Awesome. That's helpful to hear, although it is frustrating given your early, because I understand staffing is the main issue for lockdowns, or people, whoever is in the facility at the time as correctional officers. It's frustrating to hear that they're actively hiring a lot of people, but also still having trouble with lockdowns. But whatever, that is a bigger issue. But thank you for that report. I do have to jump off. I just wanted to say two quick things just so I make sure that they're heard. I do think obviously the staffing issue is a big, whatever we can do is important to that. And also, I mean, I'll just say it clearly, I think there's no way you're going to get the self-service report done by December 1st. It seems extremely difficult to do that. Well, maybe I shouldn't be that cynical or pessimistic, but like it's going to be a real challenge. We should have a discussion about sort of how to navigate that, given sort of the expectation at the end of the last legislative session and the reality of actually achieving that by December 1st, given primarily the staffing issues.
Yeah.
Thanks, Ben. So I saw Mel and then Daryl and Marisol, and that's at least the order I saw the hands in. So go ahead, Mel.
Yep. Good evening, Attorney Ward. Thank you for all your great work over the last, I guess, a year at this point. Jumping off of Ben's comment, just curious if you have communicated with the co-chairs of Judiciary for a technical change to the date of that report with the likelihood of a special session coming up, as a way to alleviate pressure so that the date is changed as a technical fix in whatever they do in a special session. So you push it back to something a little bit more reasonable.
Yeah, I just heard about the special session today. I heard that they were planning it, and then I saw the revenue estimates increase and didn't know if they were going to do it. So I just heard about the special session today, but I think that's a great idea. Something I'll certainly do tomorrow is reach out to them, but also reach out to the governor's office and see if we can get that legislative change. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, because I mean, at the very least, you avoid the you know, confusing public awareness component of an office that's not achieving its mandate when there's a whole bunch of reasons why, and the pushed back date I think would be super helpful.
Yeah.
You know, wanted to name that, like, I think given the constraints that you have, you've kind of maximized your role as an advocate for incarcerated folks, both in the legislature, in external cases, meeting with folks who have a hunger strike, and continue to realize that the role of ombudsman is a significant megaphone for issues in DOC that people aren't aware of. And there's an overlap between probably the threat of complaints that you're receiving and your ability to engage in a public advocacy role. And like one that comes to mind, for example, in terms of prison conditions, is the quality and the kind of like hygienic aspect of DOC. And my understanding is that, there are showers full of mold, there are issues with rodents, there are conditions that if the general public had a view into, even saw a photo of, I think most people would be thrown back by what their conception of a prison is and what it actually is from a living condition standpoint. And so while you may not be able to move on a number of living conditions related to health, hygiene, and vermin and all these other things, your ability to be a megaphone for the conditions are actually not that great, probably in certain facilities, through a public report or through some kind of ability that is irregularly scheduled. These are the conditions of DOC, and here are my concerns as an ombudsman, would probably go a long way to shining a light. And I imagine add a significant amount of pressure on wardens to make sure that their facilities are top notch to match what I think is the understated, probably, public expectation. And there are many versions of advocacy, media advocacy and or legislative advocacy that match that. Similarly for the hunger strikes, like we know DOC has a challenging issue because of administrative choices. Some of those certainly could be because of constraints with staffing, but your ability to do an audit as you plan, but also capture as much information as possible so that the public understands that to the extent there's just choices of efficiencies that are affecting people's dignity and lives, that the general public would know that. And it seems like you have a specific view, and granted, you have a balancing act that you have, but all of those things feel to me like the role is constrained until we figure out this hiring stuff, which we'll talk about. And yet there's this opportunity for you, obviously with more staff that are coming, to kind of programmatically develop the public reporting of what's actually occurring inside of DOC that would alert the public to the conditions, while at the same time addressing like the system issues. And while you're not addressing individual complaints, that's kind of covered under the umbrella of like public reports and advocacy. So just wanted to offer that as a thought and appreciate the work you've done this far.
Yeah, thanks. I do want to know. I'm hoping my first report, which is I spent a significant amount of time during the heat waves in prisons. We had 3 heat waves this summer. During each one of those heat waves, I was in a facility, and I have pictures and I have findings. And I'm hoping to release them sometime this month. To your point, I do have, at this point, I haven't been in this role for a year. I have pictures, I have a number of data and findings that I can't wait to share with the public. It's for me, it's been a challenge to find time to organize that, right? The report that I'm hoping to release this month on the heat mitigation stuff. It's 3,000 words and counting. It's taken me 4 days, 4 or 5 days to draft it and to compile it with pictures. And then once I do that, I have statutorily, I have an obligation to send it over to DOC to give them an opportunity to review it and comment. And I'm sure they're going to have comment and input and feedback. And, even that process takes, at least a week or two. And so, I hear you. I want to release some of the information that I have, but I don't want to release it just for the sake of releasing it and creating, outrage. I want to release it with, in the framework that's outlined in statute, with recommendations that the commissioner can either accept or reject, and for larger systemic change. And so, to your point, I hope when we convene again in a couple months, you'll be able to talk about some of the reports that I've issued, because I do have a couple of them in the pipeline that I'm hoping to release this month.
Totally appreciate it. I think that your point on doing it the right way because of the integrity of the importance of the integrity of the report, and matching the statutory requirements for informing in connection with DOC. All of that makes total sense to me. Appreciate and know that, that stuff's been in the pipeline. And as only as an individual on this committee, I will say that my own preference is the likelihood of you delving deep into individual complaints anytime soon feels unlikely given the staffing challenges that you have.
Yeah.
That the likely impact of those broader systemic reports have a ripple effect on improving people's people's conditions. And so
Sure.
I personally, on a personal level, I'm okay with a balance that prioritizes those reports at the moment, given the various constraints that you have.
Thanks, Mel. Just before we move to Daryl, just quickly echo a couple of points there. In particular, the use of media. So, I haven't followed the J. Allen Jones case as closely as many of you have, but in speaking with folks who have followed it closely, it does sound as though there was a real impact from both your testimony and also the op-ed that you wrote. And so I'll just kind of state that. First of all, thank you. I did read that. It was very well done. But seeing that that's obviously in an individual case, but I expect the same could be done on more systemic issues where, using that outlet, right? Like even if, all right, you've got a report in the works, but you have to follow the guidelines, you have to make sure, it's done properly. It sounds like, our experience has shown over the last year, one thing that you definitely can do as a solo employee of this office is use that soapbox that you've done, with the op-eds and with your testimony. So applaud you for that and just encourage that going forward. So Daryl, sorry to hold you up there.
Oh, no worries. I just want to say, number one, good to see you again, Attorney Ward. It was just like I only just seen you earlier today.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, listening to your report and stuff, and I think that I want to number one say, I commend you on the work that you are doing because you are doing the work. But also celebrating the wins too, like the getting the screeners or whatever you call them that will lower the strip searches, having been strip searched numerous times in prison. And to hear now that there might be an opportunity for people to not have to be humiliated like that, which I think that those are the wins. And I think you also talked about a couple of other wins that we talked about earlier today. But making sure that we acknowledge those too, that acknowledge the work that you're doing and acknowledging and pointing out the fact that we are making some progress. I also think, though, with that being said, I like what Mel was saying, but I really want us to focus on at least it makes me think too about language that we're using. We start to talk about dehumanizing, right? Dehumanizing. These are human rights issues. These are the things that makes everyone listen. And if you run a large corporation and you're running a corporation that is unfit for humans, and that's being brought to, I think we're being a little nice about the language, rat infestations and things like that. We need to acknowledge them for what they are, right? These are dehumanizing situations and in environments that are unfit for humans. In Connecticut, we like to pride ourselves on being a leader in criminal justice reform. Yet we have facilities that are not fit for humans, right? And we need to acknowledge that. I love we're talking about the platforms, but I think it might be time to really, start for all of us, advocates and all, to really up the ante and really start talking about we got brothers and sisters in there that can't, they're barely surviving with their commissary or whatever it is difficult enough. The last thing you know, if your mother sends her Social Security money and gets you commissary and then the mice eat it, that's messed up, and there's no replacement for that. And I don't know, a lot of people could sit and watch this on TV or watch this on Zoom or hear us talk about this, But to have been in that, 100-degree cell where there was no air conditioning, I've sweat in those cells. I know when we talked about it today, I'm triggered by remembering what it was like to be in those cells, and I can't even imagine when you're talking about hot environments, and then we're gonna add we're gonna add mice and rats to that too. I think we really need to start calling it for what it is, and really using your platform to expose, like, listen, these are unfit for humans. Like, would you want your loved one to be in this situation? And a lot of people say, well, you shouldn't have broke the law. That's not what we're doing here. You know what I mean? People broke the law, but nobody has been commissioned to dehumanize individuals. And that's always been my platform, and I'm always going to speak to that. And I think that we need to really focus on that, like really calling it out for what it is, like really saying, these are unfit for these spaces are unfit for humans. And if you're in a leadership position and you hear that enough times, either you're going to be removed from that situation or you're going to make change. They always say the squeaky wheel gets the grease. Well, this wheel needs to start squeaking a little bit more, whether it be for your staff or what have you, but we need to do something. Because I think about those individuals. We sit here, we're all sitting here advocating for those brothers and sisters that are sweating in cells right now. As I sit in my house, there's somebody sitting in a cell with their stuff tied up so the mice don't get to it.
Yeah.
This is serious work, and that's why we brought you on. You're the best man for the job. So let's make sure we're using the proper language, So once again, I commend you on the work that you're doing. Utilize this team. You got a team. You got us here. However we can help, whatever you want us to do, use your voice and say that too. Like, if you need us to push a letter, do you need us to do something? Let's have some real talk on how we could be effective as well.
Will do.
Thanks, Daryl. And I'll just quickly note that, I think we totally welcome requests for assistance at any time, not just during these meetings. But I'll also note that Marcel and I have been meeting with Devon pretty regularly between the meetings, and he has been giving that feedback and making those requests as they arrive. So certainly welcome that whenever we can be of assistance. So Marcel, thanks for your patience. Go ahead.
So I want to echo very much what Mel and Daryl both talked about: efficiency, right? Humanity, human conditions, and we've all talked about it. We all know the culture of DOC, and I think one of the things you mentioned the number of 150 cadets that were hired, right? But we wonder in terms of these staffing shortages, right? Where has there not been audits done in terms of I was incarcerated less than 6 years ago. And the fact is that I remember sitting in a cell when it was summertime, and staff, they always used to say the senior staff would get first dibs on overtime, right? And it would go from there. So my thought process, why has there not been an overview? And I understand this may not be your platform, but this is something that impacts their quality of life. And why is it there not being an audit done in terms of the practices of why are not cadets or lower man on the totem pole being, to work? So there is no staffing shortage in terms of, we've got 150 new cadets coming in, and we've got senior staff or junior staff who's been there less time than a certain amount. That doesn't impact the running of the facilities and whatnot. So that's point one. Point two, I heard you mention that the DOC believes, and their motive is the short termers, get them rehabilitated, get them out, right? What does somebody who's spending life in prison or however many years, how is that prioritizing them in terms of programming and other things? That also speaks to the human condition. We talk about the population of 11,000 that we have seen drop, but we are still at 11,000. These are still human beings, and we talk about the culture. And I think it's time to start doing that deeper dive in terms of efficiency of where are we spending this money? Where is it going? Why are these staffing shortages and this programming impacting and not showing the quality of life? So this is not, not to by no means attack you in any respect, because I know you are in the position that you're in to advocate. I think it's maybe we need to take this a little deeper than it just being, the mice and everything else, because we know that is an issue. but there's a deeper problem within the department in terms of inefficiency of funds, staffing, and proper use of resources that would not cause these issues. And I think it's just a call to action that we need to just talk about the things that nobody likes talking about, and saying that there has to be a call for a deeper dive into the audit and systems and administrative protocol for the Department of Corrections for this issues like this, not to escalate to this level. But I'm not getting on a soapbox. I know we only have so much time.
Yeah, I just want to briefly respond. You know, I've been looking at the staffing issue for quite some time over the summer months, particularly after meeting with the gentleman in Cheshire. And you know, one of the conversations I had with Daniel Karpowitz, the Undersecretary for Criminal Justice, and one of the reasons why you know, I've issued statements standing in support of what the gentleman in Cheshire are saying is because in my brief research of this issue, we're in a contract negotiation right now. I'm sure everybody's been seeing the union's been releasing statements, which, you know, I'm just going to say publicly, I think are inflammatory. But but the union's been releasing statements because they're currently in contract negotiations. But, you know, at least in my view of the issue of staffing shortages, I've identified that I don't know necessarily whether or not once even these facilities get to 100% staffing, that we're not going to go through the same issues, because it's not necessarily just the amount of staff, but how staff is able to call out. So, right, even if you have a facility that's 100% staffed, if everybody decides, hey, it's a sunny day in July, we're all going to use our designated sick time and call out, the facility will still go into lockdown. It doesn't matter if the facility's fully staffed, right? And so, you know, I'm to the point in looking at this where, you know, I'm not sure whether or not it's how we utilize or how they're able to utilize their sick and vacation time, or whether or not it's just the raw numbers on staffing. And so, you know, I was talking to a friend who's a teacher yesterday, and like teachers are not allowed to call out sick days, right? They're just not, right? Because if all the teachers said, hey, it's a warm day in May, and we're all going to use our union bargained personal and sick time, we're all going to use it on the same day, the schools would have to shut down, right? The same way our DOC facilities shut down and go into lockdown, but that doesn't happen because they're not allowed to utilize their time that way. And so that's one of the issues I'm looking at. But I do want to distinguish too that with the cadets, they're in training, they're online, they're not yet in facilities. But even with that 150, I said the way that's divvied up between 13 facilities, it really only is going to mean an additional, 10 officers at one facility, 5 officers at another facility, 150 cadets spread out between 13 facilities. It really is only a drop in the bucket for the staffing complement. But one of the things, even speaking, it dawned on me, you all as a committee could do, you all could request, DOC Central Office come and talk about these issues with you all. That's something you all could extend an invite to do, to say, hey, Deputy Warden Carlos, Deputy Warden Mulligan, hey, can you come up here? Or hey, Commissioner Gelman over at DAS, can you come over and explain kind of what's going on with the staffing challenges and the bargaining rights? And I think that's certainly a role that's allowed for this advisory committee, and not just managing, the functions of my office, but being an advisory committee for correction in the state. And so I think that's something, hopefully the committee can get into, later this year and in 2026, is calling some DOC officials to kind of talk about these issues and more in depth and lend their subject matter expertise to the committee.
Yeah, I appreciate you mentioning that because I fully agree it's within our bailiwick, and we welcome that when we're going over agendas, in advance of meetings. Definitely welcome that kind of suggestion, and I've made a note of that particular one. Mel, back to you.
Sorry, I think I got animated around this, and it just because I think it's really important for the public record, or for folks who are just not aware of sometimes what's going on. I find it deeply frustrating that the same principles that are the foundation of collective bargaining, which is fair working conditions, living wages, good health care, great benefits, the ability to provide for your family. Those were the primary reasons, say working place safety. Those were the primary reasons for the history around what collective bargaining represents, and we're post Labor Day here. I find it deeply frustrating that that same work around collective bargaining is potentially impacting because of also the benefits that people receive and the conditions that enable significant flexibility that you're naming impact people's human lives in one of the largest public health systems that the state directly manages, that has a negative impact on people's mental health and physical condition. And it would be my hope that the labor movement would recognize that the power of collective bargaining is not only the ability to secure great contracts for your union members, but actually to negotiate and bargain for living conditions that improve for people who are currently incarcerated in the DOC system, and that they're actually interlinked, that conditions that are raised, better living conditions for incarcerated people, means that people who work in prison facilities have better working conditions.
Right.
I'm deeply disappointed that when I look at the decades of collective bargaining agreements for the corrections union, those negotiations only seem to stop at what the pay grade is and what the health care is. And what's missing in the entire conversation is who they care for and the guarantees for a living condition and a health system that makes sure that people who leave prison eventually leave better and leave more whole. Uh, and so it's a nuanced issue, I'm sure, because there's management components to it too. But I just felt like that was absolutely necessary to say, because, in my history of doing criminal legal reform, one of my biggest disappointments was wondering, where are the workers who should be fighting for better programs and better services for the people in their care?
Yeah.
And if the labor movement is truly a labor movement about people in community and improving this world and securing justice, then it's not just for workers in a particular union, but actually who those workers care for. And just felt the need to jump on a soapbox on that.
No, look, I share your view, and to that point, I'm meeting with the union on Monday. So I'm meeting with Ashmi on Monday.
I'm really glad to hear that.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. So
that is because I would hope they are equally concerned about prison lockdowns.
I think at least from their public statements and the conversations I've had with them briefly, we have a lot that we share. And in terms of shared concern, I stand with them in terms of wanting raises and wanting good benefits and working conditions for folks who are in corrections. We need good folks in correction, and we're
And I
not going to
and
be
I
able to we're
and
not
I
going to be able to
totally
attract them unless we have good working conditions. But to the other point, about your point about them being compassionate to the folks that they're here serving. I really upset me to see their attacks on the Protect Act. They're consistent attacks on the Protect Act, and their consistent attacks on things meant to make the living conditions of the folks that they're serving better. And I think that's unfortunate. I think it's divisive. I think it doesn't serve their ultimate goal. It makes them look petty. It makes them look inhumane. It makes them look all the things that people say are not great about correctional staff. And I'm going to say this directly to them on Monday. I wish they'd stop. They can get their point across about the challenges and the harms and the risks that they face without having to talk derogatory about incarcerated folks. Everybody gets it's a challenging job. You don't see firefighters do that. You rarely see police officers do that. There's a way to do what they're trying to do without having to talk bad and inflame the folks that they have to deal with every day. And I just, look, I'm looking forward to having that conversation with them because, to your point, there's a lot of shared interests. Like when I talk to them, they're just as ticked off about the staffing shortages as we are. When I was in Garner, and I was in Garner the other day, and I shared this with Governor Lamont when I saw him last week. I don't think folks realize the staffing shortages. They're not just impacting custody. they're impacting the medical care in prisons. When we're in staffing shortages, the nurses can't call folks down to sick call
Right.
because they can't have folks down in sick call without custody staff being able to, watch what's going on. And so, I was in Garner, which is one of one of the highest medical and mental health needs facilities in the state. And because they were on lockdown, they weren't doing med sick call, and so to that point, I know that staff shares the frustration with the lockdowns.
Yeah.
They share the frustration with the staffing shortage, and we're in alliance or in agreement on that. And so I'm looking forward to the conversation with them on Monday.
I appreciate that, and the public may also not be aware that labor in prisons is subsidized by the very people serving time, be it cleaning those facilities or serving food or what have you.
Yeah.
I've also just to name it, right? I've also been frustrated with AFSCME in the labor movement because there's a subset of workers in prisons who are actually serving time that aren't represented by the very union that represents the workers that are providing services, some of which are subsidized by the very people serving time.
Yeah.
And it would seem to me that if AFSCME is arguing for increased pay, they would also argue for increased pay for the people that are serving time, then are working the jobs that subsidize AFSCME employees. It would seem to me that AFSCME would be arguing simultaneously for better health care for their workers and for the workers that are incarcerated doing jobs and for the people that are receiving services. So I'm glad you're meeting with AFSCME, and for the
Mel, you should come with me. You should come with me on Monday, man.
I'd be more than happy to.
You should come, man, because it's gonna be 20v1.
So hopefully they're watching.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, I think that's great. I didn't know you were meeting with the union Monday, but yeah, just to totally echo what Mel was saying, like it's essential for correctional staff and for the union to appreciate that, as Mel said, better standards for the incarcerated community will mean better working conditions for the folks minding them, and on the other end, that better working conditions and better treatment for correctional staff likely would mean better conditions for those incarcerated. I think we speak a lot about, or look to the example of Nordic countries and different prison systems as being preferable and treating more humanely the incarcerated people. But I think the employees there are also probably more satisfied with their jobs than are here. So I'm really grateful that you'll be meeting with the union, and hope you can make some headway. Marisol, I see your hand raised again, and then we'll move on to staffing.
So I have to bring this up because, we talk about, it kind of ties into what Mel just talked about with, the unrepresented workers who are in DOC, who are a part of the incarcerated population. But it also speaks to this idea. I'm not sure if people really understand, like you heard our ombudsman say, I was in that hot prison cell, in that facility when it was hot during one of these cycles. And like, I will speak for myself, I will not speak for Daryl, but I know what it's like to have been in a cage in the middle of the summertime when it's lockdown, right? And it's, the whole concept of the PROTECT Act, right? Whether the language is it's appropriate or not, or fully workable. Imagine, not you're in an 8x8, 8x10 cell. You don't go anywhere. It's hot. That's where you sit, you pace. What do you think is going to happen when you don't get any movement, you don't get anywhere, and then you start going stir crazy? It's like no different than a dog or an animal in a cage. You rile it up with no movement, you rile it up with mocking or nastiness. The animal, and then on top of that, with the hypervigilance issues that prison incurs, if an animal is afraid, as will be a human being, they're not sure, they start going stir crazy. What do you think is going to happen when they feel backed into a corner and can't do anything? Right. So for the DOC and for the media to play it up like their fear and safety of concern, what about the people who are sitting there? They're not exactly sure. They're stir crazy. They're hot. they're in less than ideal circumstances, as we all talk about with mice and other things, in a cell 8 by 10.
Yeah.
You know, so of course that's going to be the pushback. What else are you going to do? But then on top of that, one thing that has come to my attention, and I'm not sure if the ombudsman is aware of this, is the fact that those employees who work for the Department of Corrections, who are incarcerated workers, have had their pay held back because of whatever payroll hiccups have been, up to a month or two that they are getting paid. And we're talking about people who live off of the $10.50 every 2 weeks that they may get in order to be able to get hygiene products, food, maybe, if that's what they're able to get. So again, where do you expect people, if this is all they have coming in, they have no food other than what's being served, and they're locked in a cage? What do you expect there to be if there's no pushback, when you have no money, no support, and you're not going anywhere? You're at the end of your rope. I would be no different, and anybody else who has never been incarcerated would be the same. Let's not forget what COVID incurred for a lot of people. That kind of stir craziness.
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't, is that payroll issue, that's a recent issue? This is the first time I'm hearing about it.
One of my little ones, who is actually in the York Correctional Facility, has been telling me that she has not been paid for a month and a half, almost two. And I've heard this even from Cheshire, from some of the people there as well, that some of the employees, not those who work for the DLC corrections, not the ones who make uniforms or things that work like that.
Not correctional enterprises.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Okay.
But those who work, that are like, let's say, laundry workers, or anybody who works along, like in the kitchen. Those are the employees that are not, their pay has been held up by a month, 6 weeks, sometimes two. It's been a while that they've been paid.
Okay. So yeah, let's talk offline about that, because I'm happy to help troubleshoot that. This is the first I've heard of it.
All right, so I know we need to move on to staffing. I'll just make one comment, I guess more than a question, on the triage policy. Well, I'll say, like Mel said earlier, I fully endorse and support the notion that, while you are a one-man office, you need to be focusing on the things that you can actually do efficiently, and not, just kind of running on a hamster wheel. And I think you've been doing that. So I support like the broader sort of policy positions, that you've been taking and prioritizing the last year. But also, like Ben, it pains me that, as I think it likely pains you, that there are 300 something complaints sitting there, in part because the mandate of the office is in large part to investigate those complaints, to assist with those complaints, but also in a really particular way. I hate the idea of folks asking for help and not hearing back.
Absolutely.
So
Breaks
I'm
my heart.
grateful that the triage, policy will be meant to address that. I don't know if I heard this correctly. I thought you might have said that the response would be within 45 days of.
Mhm.
Is that just like an acknowledgement of the complaint?
Correct.
Is there no way to?
We could speed that up. We could certainly speed that up. So the reason why I had the 45-day mark is just because of the backlog. Let's say hypothetically we get somebody, an assistant and a clerk typist in October. By that time, they're gonna have 400 complaints, between the two of them to go through. And they're still gonna be receiving more complaints every day. So that's why I say, 45 days from when you make the complaint. We'll
Right.
get
Okay.
back to
So
you,
that was more descriptive than a normative policy then, right? You're talking about how the likely length of time it would take to acknowledge the existing backlog.
correct.
Okay. Well, obviously, anything we can do to expedite that would be great. But I guess misheard. I think as a sort of policy going forward, once we have administrative staff in place, I think it would be really important to just have a default policy of just acknowledging receipt of the complaint. I don't know, within a week, right? Like just we have
Yeah.
heard you. It's going to take a while for us to actually, do anything about this.
Right.
We don't want you to think that you're just shouting into the void. It just saddens me to think that that could be the case, even though I fully recognize the reasons, external reasons why.
No, it is. I mean, look, that's what keeps me up at night is just to share with you all. It's a horrible feeling to every day I hear some type of atrocity that is going on in a facility, and I don't have the tools to or the staff to be able to deal with it. And that's a crappy feeling to feel every day. To not have that agency. And so I'm working on trying to build the capacity to address it as quickly as we can. And so to that point, I'll turn it
Yeah,
back to you.
thanks. And I don't doubt that you feel it every bit as much. Somewhat relatedly, on the case management system, just to note, you had no obligation to kind of run the expense. You mentioned the expense. You had no obligation to kind of run that by us, but I want to just note that you did, and that we're fully supportive of that investment, because our hope is that will help not only to manage individual complaints, but help you to kind of take the 1,000-foot view and identify more systemic issues. And so I think you basically just said this in response to my last question, but it sounds like the existing backlog of complaints will be run through that system.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. That's great. I'm glad to hear that, and totally support investment in technology to try to make this job manageable. So mindful of time, staffing is the big issue. I just want to make just state a few things which might help move us forward. First, Attorney Ward in his report mentioned the need for the committee, the advisory committee, to sort of weigh in with our appointing authorities. In case folks don't know, there are specific legislators or the governor who has appointed each of us to this committee, and these are obviously people potentially with some influence. So we've spoken before about this and are committed to doing that, within the week. So we'll look, to various members of the committee for sort of wording, how to put that. But I'm confident I can speak for all of us that we support the notion that the hiring issues should be addressed. And this may be obvious to other folks. It wasn't really to me. It's very hard for me personally to understand why after a year there's no progress here. I just want to note, and members of the committee have received this, Attorney Ward gave us a rundown of various efforts he's made, requests he's made, et cetera, over the last year. I'm sorry about the dog, on the question of hiring. And I think I can say confidently that the problem is not a lack of interest or effort on the Ombud's part in getting these positions filled. And it may be that exactly what is needed is additional public pressure on those who may be able to exert pressure on DAS and OPM to prioritize this need, which absolutely is, as Attorney Ward stated, as others have stated, impeding the ability of the office to fulfill statutory mandates. So A, we will be doing the letter, but B, anything else, Attorney Ward, that you want to discuss with respect to staffing or update us with in terms of how we can help, what the issues are, and then of course invite comments, questions from other committee members.
I don't have anything else. I don't want to take up more time.
All right. Well, this is a big issue, but maybe not one that there's, we're all kind of in lockstep in recognizing the significance of the issue. So we'll be committing to exercising whatever influence we have to assist with that. For any members of the public, we'd encourage you as well to contact your legislators. And I think the significant thing to note is that the requests have been made, right? So, and the funding is there, right? For a couple of years, we thought our big obstacle was the lack of funding. That's still an issue, but we have the funds to hire these positions, and so it's confounding to me. I just don't understand why there would be such a delay in doing so, in actually filling the positions. So yes, we'll commit to that. We encourage others to also to weigh in, and hopefully we can get positions filled. I guess I do one question on that point. We do, as you said, there's 2 positions that were posted and the applications have closed as of yesterday. So what would be the timeline now in terms of reviewing, interviewing, and actually getting people hired?
Yeah. So DAS vets the applicants to see if they've met the minimum qualifications and the job posting qualifications. I get a list of the folks who have been vetted by DAS, and then I can select folks to interview. I'll have to set up a hiring committee. I certainly welcome members of the committee to join me. But if you're unable to because of other obligations, DAS will find folks to sit on the hiring committee. We can. I'd like to do at least two rounds of interviews, and then it's selecting a candidate and making an offer, and then the offer being accepted, and then getting them onboarded is kind of the next round of the process. And so I would say for each posting, I'm likely not going to interview more than 10 people because even those 10 is going to be pretty significant. Yeah, I'm gonna, they're gonna send me a list of last time they sent me a list of almost 200 applicants. I narrowed it down to 57. And then out of that 57, I picked maybe 13 before we decided to switch over to a different job class. But that's the process. Is there'll be a hiring committee. They'll send me a list of candidates. I'll select from those. They'll go through interview rounds, and then we'll make a selection. I'll make an offer. They'll have to accept, and then we'll get them onboarded.
Great. So yeah, I guess there's still more of a process ahead, although at least it is moving. I'd invite you to keep us updated with respect to the hiring committee. I think for me at least, quickness and efficiency is paramount above. And if having us be involved would slow that down in any way, then I'm not interested. But if we can help. And if it's helpful to have members of the committee serve on those hiring committees, then by all means reach out, and folks who are interested and available can assist with that. And yeah, I hope that those are administrative. So the remaining ones are very significant. The associate ombuds, these deputy ombuds,
yeah.
But those are big picture, really big jobs. But I hope at least that getting the clerical administrative positions filled will at least help alleviate some of the backlog and some of the things that take up so much of your time, so that we can really address the big picture issues more. All right, so we know it's a big issue. We know what we're going to do about it. Attorney Ward, please, after the meeting, continue to say, hey, this is what we could do. Here's this particular person that you could contact. Does anybody know this person? Those sorts of things. Anything we can do to move the process along, I think we're all eager to. Just very briefly, because I want to make sure we have some time for public comment. The working groups that we've discussed, we can continue that conversation via email, but I appreciate the folks who have volunteered. Just for the sake of folks who may be watching, the hope is that while we have these quarterly formal meetings that are statutorily mandated, members of the committee in smaller working groups can have a more active hands-on role between the meetings, and so we're focusing on a kind of visioning concept, the big picture, the priorities of the office, when we have the luxury to be more concerned about that. Also funding and kind of government relations, and also outreach. And so I alluded to this earlier, but there will be a group of us who are focused primarily on the outreach of both the ombuds and the advisory committee to the community at large, including, of course, the impacted community at holding events, etc. So we have those in place. We don't need votes on them, but that's a kind of to be continued that will continue offline, because I don't think it requires too much of our time during this meeting. So then, if Kirsten is around, I expect we have some folks who might wish to make comments, and we're very happy to hear them in whatever order Kirsten determined.
So
Actually,
we received one request from Barbara Fair to speak. That was the one that I received in terms of an email. So I don't see her on just yet. I don't know if we want to give her a sec to join.
Yeah.
while we wait for her to join, just a reminder that for people, we're agreeing and we're grateful that people are becoming a little more active. It's a reminder for anybody who has difficulty with time commitments that there may be other folks who welcome the opportunity to kind of serve on the committee. So since we're all in the middle of a 4-year term, or almost the end of, anytime you feel like you can't commit, please make sure you reach out to myself or my co-chair so we can see how we can work with you to recommend a replacement for you if you are so wishing to step down from your role.
Yeah, that's an important point. I totally overlooked it, but I'm glad we have a little extra time to discuss it, because we do already have one vacancy, as folks may be aware. John Cipolla resigned. That is an appointment of Representative Fishbein, and the person who takes that kind of slot on the committee is meant to be a person who has been the victim of violent crime, or the relative of a victim of violent crime, or who advocates for victims of violent crime, or has an attorney who has represented victims of violent crime. Although I've reached out a couple of times to Representative Fishbein just to note the vacancy, I have not, and I don't think others have, made a specific recommendation. And I do think that probably would help move the process of appointing a replacement for John Cipolla along. So to that end, this goes, in particular to members of the committee, but also members of the public. If you have in mind folks who might be interested in serving on this committee and who would fulfill that description, which regrettably is very broad, as I mentioned to Marisol earlier, and folks might recall from our original appointment hearing, Senator Porter pointed out that most of the folks in custody have been victims of violent crimes, and attorneys who have represented them would qualify. They themselves would qualify. Their family members would qualify. So that's the sort of description, and you can look at it in the Protect Act or on our website. It has all of our appointing letters. So if you look at the letter appointing John Cipolla from Representative Fishbein, it describes that sort of qualification, if you will, or demographic. And I think it would be helpful for us to make a recommendation or several recommendations for someone to fulfill John's role. As folks have probably observed, we also John Bowen on our committee has not resigned, but has not been particularly active. So he's a person who we may reach out to ask whether he wishes to continue or wishes to resign his position. That spot is a person who has expertise in corrections. So at least the violent crime victim related position is vacant. And as Marisol said, to the extent now or in the future, any of the remainder of us feel, that someone else might be better suited for the role or might have more time for the role, our hope is that we can have a conversation about potential replacements before the vacancy opens, because I think what we saw, that was the case is with Marisol coming on. There was our former co-chair Melinda had resigned, but there was already in place a suggested person for that position, and that went a lot more smoothly compared to the current vacancy. So a very rambling way of saying, please reach out to us with suggestions for the existing vacancy, and if and when you're considering your own term on the committee, let's think about potential folks who could replace us in advance. I don't know if I bought enough time for Barb to log back on. If not, Kirsten, were there any other?
No, I didn't have anybody else who requested any time to speak.
Okay, well, so what I'd just say again is that we welcome comments directly or through written submissions to Kirsten at any time. So I think Barb knows that very well, and we're always very receptive to her comments and suggestions for our work, since she's so invested in this area. So I have no doubt that we will hear. I see in the waiting room, so we do have a few minutes left, and why don't we hear from Ms. Fair once she's joined. No doubt that we will hear. I see in the waiting room, so we do have a few minutes left, and why don't we hear from Ms. Fair once she's joined. I feel like I just went back in time by a few seconds, but Barb, thanks so much. Please, the floor is yours.
Oh, sorry. Sorry. Oh, hold on a minute.
I feel like I just went
Can you hear me?
By a few seconds, but we can hear you, but we also hear me rambling on in the background. So I don't know if there's a way to mute that part. But we can hear you if you go ahead.
Oh, hold on. Am I on now?
Loud and clear now. Thanks.
Oh my God. Sorry about that. I was on YouTube watching and trying to figure out how do I get in the other thing, and I just got the link. But thank you for at least taking a few minutes just to hear, listening to the meeting. We have a lot of work to go. One thing I want to piggyback on what Mel was saying, and that's at the advocacy role, like the conditions that that Devon is getting from inspecting the prisons. Those things should be publicized by the media, just like everything that DOC tries to publicize. And I know he's had pictures and all that kind of stuff for a while now. So I myself have been waiting to see those things get in public. I think it'll go a long ways in letting people who have no clue about prisons know the kind of conditions that people are living in, and maybe they will understand why you see violence in the prisons. Violence is a prison's result of the conditions that they're forced to live in, and reaching out and feeling that no one's helping them. They have a hunger strike that's ignored. And so they're just feeling like they're going to go crazy. Like Marisol said, anyone would do that. So I think once the public understands what people are going through, then they'll see, well, now I can understand why there's violence in this this population, because look what they're going through. For some reason, my Zoom went down. Oh God.
We can still hear you, Barb.
As long as you can hear me, that's all that matters. And so another couple of things I wanted to say. Remember when we met with New Jersey that the leader there said the most important thing in this position is showing up for people, because this is all the incarcerated people have to reach out to is our ombudsman's office, along with a lot of us other people, but this is what they really should be reaching out for the ombuds. So showing up, like the New Jersey say, even if you can't do anything, showing up tells them that they matter. And so to me, that was the most important thing about having this position, is having incarcerated people know that they have somebody who cares about what's going on with them. And you won't get that if you're not in the prisons talking to people and hearing from people. As far as the lockdowns, Attorney Ward is right. The language needs to be tightened up because they are too loose with that language. But with no challenge, no enforcement of PROTECT Act, they're going to continue to do what they're doing. as far as the backlog, remember that many of these complaints came in last year. So by now, they probably gotten the help that they needed or not. So there shouldn't be that much of a backlog now, especially when they were notified that they was not going to be taking any complaints in the fall anyway, up until this fall anyway. So I'm certain that once you look through the complaints, there's not going to be a huge backlog. I know myself, there's many issues that came to me that I resolved on my own. I know there's other advocates who are doing the same thing. So I wouldn't be so worried about there being such a huge backlog of complaints coming in. And then as far as the Jay Allen case, when we went to court and they were saying that they wanted to offer piecemeal on the video, we advocates, frontline advocates, absolutely are not accepting that proposal at all. There is no show us parts of the video. You show us the full video. And I'm hoping that's the kind of support we're going to get from the ombudsperson, because that's what they need to hear. We're not accepting your little piecemeal. We want to see what happened to Jay Allen the day he died inside of that cell in Gardner, and no one was held accountable. So I'm going to leave it at that. But I can talk to Devon, because I want to know what some of these positions actually going to be doing. Like the ombuds investigator, you want to know what are they doing? So we can talk about that, and hopefully this process will move on, because this is ridiculous that it's been a whole year and we don't have not one staff member in that office. And whatever is in the way, if it's the governor's office, then that's where we need to be spending our time, in the governor's office, trying to figure out why it is that you're not supporting this office in a meaningful way. And I'm going to leave it there. But thank you for the time.
Thank you, Barb, for your comment and all of your work. And I think, yeah, it goes back to a theme of the evening that I think we all agree with. It is ridiculous that there's no staff in place, and to the extent that is because of inadequate investment or attention to this office by certain other parts of government. That's something I think we have an obligation to expose, to publicly identify, and that I believe is part of the Ombud's request to us in terms of this letter that we'll be drafting within the next few days. So we are eager to do that. Again, we invite others to bring the same pressure to bear, and hopefully at our next meeting in December, we will have staff in place. We'll have a lot more clarity on how the office is going to be staffed with these larger positions, and have some good news to share. But thank you again to everyone. Marcel, if there's anything you want to say in closing, please go ahead. But I just appreciate everyone's time, and including those who have watched on YouTube. Thanks for all your support and advocacy.
Thank you, everyone. Good night. Good seeing everybody.
You too. That's all I'm going to add myself, is that they've done a wonderful thing working together. That's all I've got to add.
Right. Good night, everyone. Thank you for your time. We're adjourned at 8:03. And again, our next meeting, which is on our website, will be December 11th. Am I right?
Yep.
December 11th, public hearing at the Capitol. We look forward to seeing you then. Then we'll be continuing, obviously,